Okay then, so this is just a very quick introduction to scatter graphs. I have a spreadsheet here. We're all familiar with spreadsheets now, full of data, and I've used this data to create a bar chart and a pie chart and a radar graph, and we're all fairly familiar with these things now, and it was all created using this data. The thing is, I might want to compare one piece of data with another piece of data, and that is when we use a scatter graph. If we have two data sets and we believe that one of those data sets is dependent upon or affected by the other, or that there might be a correlation between the two data sets, we can create a scatter graph, sometimes called a scatter plot, to try to identify if there is a correlation and what that correlation is. And it's a format of graph that is quite often used when carrying out statistical analysis. And that's exactly what we're doing with both the Shoebox survey and your own survey once the results come back. So let's just have a quick look at something and see if we can make sense of this. So, Shoebox task. I've taken some information from the Shoebox task here. I have copied over the staff friendliness column and the staff helpfulness column. And I'm going to create, just very quickly, a scatter graph to find out if friendliness and helpfulness are in any way related, if there's a connection between the two things. So it's very easy on this version of Excel, and at this point I have to say it does depend on which version of Excel you're using. This is the latest version of Excel. You may be using a slightly earlier version that may not have all the features of this one. But just go with me just now so you can get the idea of what a scatter graph looks like. So we'll just select some of this information for the purposes of demonstration. There you go. I've selected this, all these returns for friendliness, along with the returns for helpfulness. This is one respondent's responses, this is another respondent's responses, and so on. And let's find out if how friendly they are is linked to how helpful they are. And we're going to use a scatter diagram to do it, a scatter graph to do it. So if we click on Insert, we can see here we've got a whole bunch of charts we can pick from, and the one I want is this one. Click on that, comes up with some options. The one I want is the first one. Click there. Now, what we've got is just what looks like a bunch of random dots, okay? So to make this a little bit easier, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I have got some titles and things here. So I'm selecting layout 1 from this, and this here is the helpfulness. So if I click here and type in helpfulness, that goes there, and if I click here and type friendliness, so we've got the helpfulness up one axis and the friendliness along the other axis, and we've got this series of dots here. Okay, I should give it a title, but just for speed, we're just going to push on. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this chart onto a new sheet in the spreadsheet so it shows up full screen if you like. So I'll go and move chart, I'm going to put it onto a new sheet which it will call chart 1, and I'm fine with that. And there you go, there's that same thing. Looks a bit different because it's just been blown up. So there's our helpfulness up this side, there's our friendliness there, and this scattering of dots, which is why it's called a scatter graph. Now what's important here is we're looking to see if there's any correlation. And the way we do that is very simple in Excel. If we click this plus up here and click on the trend line, it puts the trend line in. And this is a positive correlation. This shows us that as friendliness increases, so does helpfulness. So this is a positive correlation. And that's quite a strong positive correlation. So as friendliness increases, so does helpfulness. And if we go back to our data, which is here, this is kind of what I thought we were going to see. And it kind of makes sense. It's human nature. If somebody's a friendly person, they're much more likely to want to help you out. So that graph clearly points that out to us. This is called a positive correlation. The friendlier somebody is, the more helpful they are. And that's shown clearly in this graph. So I'll give another example of a positive correlation. This is a graph I prepared earlier. And this is taken from that very first spreadsheet I showed you. If you go back to the data, okay, this is about, I think it's the age against the minutes of active physical exercise. Yeah, age in years along the bottom, average minutes exercising per day going up the side. And again, we can see here's a scattering of dots. If we click on the plus sign and ask for the trend line, there it's again a very positive correlation there. So the older the child becomes, the more time they're spending exercising. And again, that kind of makes sense. That's just a common sense guess you could make, but there's the proof. There's a positive correlation there. An example of a negative correlation. This is the age in years, again, of those children that we had in that first spreadsheet I showed you. And we've graphed the age in years against the quality sleeping hours per night. Now, as we all know, very young children tend to sleep for ages, and then the amount of sleep they require, we guess it goes down as they get older. And if you look at the trend line, sure enough, there it is. As the children gets older, the amount of sleep they require goes down. Now, I've stopped this at age 13 because we all know when you get to 14, 15, 16, you can sleep for Scotland. But in this age group, the trend is quite clearly a negative correlation. The older you get, the less sleep you require. So positive correlation is shown by a line sloping up from left to right, and a negative correlation is shown by a line sloping down from left to right. These are called the trend lines, and that's what we're looking for in our scatter graphs. So there you go, a very quick introduction to scatter graphs and what they do. They are used for looking for correlations between two sets of data where we suspect there is a correlation, or where one of the data sets is dependent upon or affected by the other. And it's a very useful tool when you're looking for patterns in responses to surveys. It's something you might want to use when your responses come back from your survey. Hope this has been of use. If there's anything you don't understand, just ask your lecturer and they will try to explain it to you. Bye now.